एक और बोर्ड भी यहाँ पे लगे हुए ताकि आप गुम ना हो जाए। वेलकम टू फाइंड इंफॉर्मेशन द निकोल्स ब्रिज वे। सो ये है द निकोल्स ब्रिज वे। काफ़ी मज़े का वॉकवे है, ब्रिज। साथ साथ वो बंदा गन भी उठा रहा है। देखिए सफाई का क्या ख़ास इंतज़ाम है शिकागो में। अच्छा ये व्लॉग थोड़ा सा हट के होगा और व्लॉग से, क्योंकि थोड़ा लंबा है। आई विल से यू गाइस के थोड़ा टाइम निकाल के और उसको आप पूरा देखो ताकि फील योर सेल्फ इन शिकागो। हाँ, मिलेनियम पार्क में अपने आप को आप लोग फील करो। अच्छा यहाँ से आपको पूरा पार्क नज़र आएगा ऊपर से। देखिए वहाँ से भी आप जा सकते हो, वॉक कर सकते हो। तो काफ़ी बड़ा है पार्क है।
चिया चाय लू। देखो सदर ये बोल रहा था मैं फोन पे।
अच्छा यहाँ पे ना रेस्टोरेंट्स हैं और बहुत सारे कैफ़ेज़ हैं, स्टारबक्स भी था पीछे। आप मिलेनियम पार्क भी जा सकते हो, फिर आगे आके रिफ़्रेशमेंट लो, खाना शाना खाओ। अच्छा बड़े फ्रेंडली है, अच्छा डर नहीं रहे। क्यों? So this is called Michigan Avenue. ये है मिशिगन एवेन्यू का एरिया। Michigan Avenue in Chicago. शिकागो ESPN 1000 AM रेडियो चैनल की गाड़ी है। नैंडोज। ओके जनाब, तो अभी 8 मिनट्स हैं। 8 मिनट में हम अपनी क्रूज़ वाली डेस्टिनेशन पे पहुंच जाएंगे। वहाँ पे जाके हम बोट लेंगे और बोट में आपको फिर शिकागो दिखाएंगे।
That's so good.
Oh hell yeah. जी तो जनाब वॉक करते करते भागते भागते अभी हम पहुंचते हैं वहाँ पे क्रूज़ में, क्योंकि उन्होंने बोला था कि 10-15 मिनट आप पहले पहुंचो। तो 10-15-20 मिनट पहले हम पहुंचते हैं वहाँ पे और फिर देखते हैं। So stay tuned। कोई काफ़ी मखलूक आई है शिकागो, तो चेक करें।
We get some ugly looks when they let us in. With the
होगी स्टोर में।
Those are for like snow. This stuff freaks me out.
Okay.
You guys want to go too?
yeah.
I'm done.
वाह।
It's on this.
वाह। तो अभी हम जाएंगे नीचे, राइट। तो हमने पहुंचा दिए ख़ुद को यहाँ पे, टाइम पे पहुंचाया, पर आखिरी लोग हैं हम। बड़ी बुरी बात है। तो अभी हम वेंडेला के पास आ गए हैं जनाब। बोट हमारी ये रेडी है, खड़ी है। ये वही है जो ट्रम्प टावर हमने आपको दिखाया था, उसके पास। तो ये पूरी लाइन अभी जाएगी, इस बोट में बैठेगी, और आपके भाई को भी यहीं पे जगह मिलनी चाहिए बोट में ऊपर। अगर ना मिली तो हम नीचे से ऊपर आ जाएंगे। नो वरीज। 2 घंटे का ट्रिप है। ये भाई यहाँ पे टिकट देख रहे हैं, टिकट बगैर नहीं छोड़ते। ओके, हियर वी गो। ओके, तो इसका टिकट है $45 पर पर्सन, और ये आपको 90 मिनट्स टूर देती है यहाँ पे। वाह। अब मुझे ये पता नहीं है कि हमें ऊपर वाली जगह मिलेगी या नहीं, लेकिन हमें ऊपर वाली मिलनी चाहिए। ऊपर वाली ना मिली तो फिर सारा प्लान चौपट हो जाएगा। काफ़ी बड़ी बोट है। ओके, तो ये हैं, हमें बताएंगे अभी कि क्या हो रहा है इधर।
This vessel is inspected and certified annually by the U.S. Coast Guard and is fitted with all
अच्छा, ये
required
जगह है
safety
जहाँ से
features.
पूरी बोट जो है
Wi-Fi
चल रही
is
होती है
on
इस
deck
रूम से।
and forward and aft on the main deck.
Beaux Arts. A French Beaux Art style building is going to have three things on it. It'll have an ornately decorated bottom, a stack of plain flooring, then an ornately decorated top. That is the French Beaux Arts architectural style. Now, let's move on to a more recent building. It's the second tallest building in Chicago on the right-hand side. This is the Trump International Hotel and Tower, designed by Adrian Smith in 2009. Adrian Smith, let's talk about him. He is a world-famous Chicago local architect. He is world-famous not for designing this building. He is more world-famous for designing the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Raise a hand, see who here's heard of the Burj Khalifa. Of course, that is the world's tallest building. Let's put the height of the Burj Khalifa into perspective. Look at the top of Trump Tower. Add another Trump Tower on top of that. Really? You can only see about half of the Burj Khalifa right now if you're looking at it. This building is 1,388 feet tall. Burj Khalifa is 2,717 feet tall. Keep looking on the right. You will see this black box building. This black box building is the American Medical Association building, but it's also an architectural landmark because it's the last office building designed by the architect named Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe came up in architecture around the mid-1900s, and as he was becoming an architect, all the architects around him were cladding their buildings a lot of fancy carved stone and ornamentation. All that stuff was beautiful, but it cost money, took time, and technically it was unnecessary to the function of the building. Mies van der Rohe revolutionized the whole world of architecture with one phrase: less is more. He got rid of all the unnecessary stuff, focused on the function of the building, not just the outside of it, putting his work into perspective. Look at that black box building there. Not much to say about the building physically, right? But before Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, no building in the world looked like that building. That might be a weird thing to hear, because if you've been to any modern city, every building in the world looks like that building. It's a plain rectangular steel box. That is called the International Style of Architecture. It basically sparked the modernist movement of architecture. Now, a huge part of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe's career is he was a professor, and he taught a lot of architects this whole less is more philosophy. I am pretty sure one of his students disagreed with him, though, because that guy's name was Bertrand Goldberg. He designed these two buildings right next to us. The Corn Cobs, as they are better well known in Chicago for obvious reasons. The actual name of these buildings is Marina City Towers, built in 1963 by Bertrand Goldberg in an effort to attract middle-class workers downtown to live. Because folks, back in the day, nobody wanted to live in downtown Chicago. Most people just worked down here. So Bertrand designed those two buildings like a city inside of a city. On the inside, there was a roller rink, a grocery store, a doctor's office, a movie theater, a bowling alley, any accommodation you could need or want to live downtown. The most common questions I get about those two buildings. One, what do the apartments look like on the inside? I've got a weird answer for you there, and it's a slice of pie. And the pointy end goes outwards towards the balcony. The other common question I get, has anybody ever driven off in the parking lots before? Yep, twice. Once for a movie, once for an advertisement. Nobody was hurt. The movie, Steve McQueen's second to last film, The Hunter, and then the ad was in the early 2000s. The Allstate Insurance Company drove a car halfway off the building, hung the car off the side, put an Allstate billboard underneath that, sort of showing the worst case scenario for a vehicle in Chicago for their insurance company. Now, right next to us here, this red brick building, is the Reed Murdoch Center, built in 1914 by George Nimmons. There's something weird about this one. Look at the clock tower. Count the columns of windows to the right of the clock tower. I'll do it for you. There are 6. Look to the left side of the clock tower and count the columns of windows. There's only 5 on the other side. The whole building is off-center. The clock tower is not in the middle of it. Why? That building was built in 1914. The bridge in front of us, built in the 1930s. Whenever they put the bridge in, they would extend out that street there, put in the bridge house. They knocked down that column of windows. So the Murdoch Center, building 1 always asymmetrical. Now, coming out from underneath the bridge, right next to us, this is 300 North LaSalle, designed by Picard and Chilton in 2009. This is one of the most environmentally friendly buildings in Chicago. It was built with over 60% recycled materials. Would you guys believe me if I told you? No air conditioning units inside of this building. No one's suffering in there during the summertime. The way they cool the building off is using the river water. They pump it in through the walls, pump it out cleaner than it actually already was. But I'm apprehensive to say that one, because it may no longer be true, because that process heats the water up, and that can negatively affect the wildlife in the river. We do have wildlife in the river. Over 70 different species of fish live in the Chicago River. Going back in time again, 1931, the Marshall Field Corporation, better known today as Macy's, had 18 warehouse buildings scattered all around Chicago. They want to combine them into one building. Maybe you're thinking 18 warehouses all in one building. Wouldn't that be a ridiculously giant building? Look to the right, you would be correct on that. This ridiculously giant building is the Merchandise Mart, built in 1931 by Graham Anderson, Probst and White. Whenever this massive Art Deco building was first built, it was the largest concrete building in the country by square feet. Today, it's only number 2 in that category. Does anybody know what number 1 is now? Big hit government building. The Pentagon. Somebody got it right back there. Now, the Merchandise Mart has over 4.2 million square feet of space, over 8 miles of hallway in the building. Till the 90s, that building had its own zip code.
So y'all, if you're at the top deck really close to me, make sure if you do talk, keep it at a whisper because that's a big distraction to me. You're right by my ear. Thank you.
Now, right next to us, you're going to see an outcrop piece of land right here called Wolf Point. Wolf Point is very historically significant. This is the land where the first non-native visitors, their names were Marquette and Joliet. This is where they were first brought with the indigenous people, the Potawatomi, and they were brought here in 1673. Now, when the Potawatomi brought Marquette and Joliet to the land, they kept referring to it as Chicago. So we get our name, Chicago. Now, Marquette and Joliet took the word Chicago as the name of the land. That was wrong. That was not the name of the land the Potawatomi were telling them. They were telling them the natural crop that grew from the land, the medicinal onion that had a very strong fragrance to it. That's what Chicago means. Folks, Chicago roughly translates into smelly onion. That's true. So take that, New York City, and be called the Big Apple all day long. Chicago, we're the smelly onions. Go one for Chicago. Now, as we are turning here down the north branch of the river, the next building we're talking about is going to be on our left-hand side, but right now it's right in front of us. It's this slightly curved apartment building with a blue at the very top with these balconies on it, very aptly titled The Residencies of River Bend. Designed by James DiStefano and completed in 2001, this is a great example of something in architecture called contextualism. Contextualism is in architecture whenever you design a building within the context of the building's surroundings. Simplifying this, the river is bending right here, the building is contextualized with the river, it bends with it. Now we're going to stay on the left-hand side and talk about the rectangular red brick building in front of us called Fulton House. Now, Fulton House is the oldest building we will see on the tour today. It was built in 1889 as a dairy storage warehouse. It got redesigned in the 1980s into an apartment building by the architect named Harry Weiss. Now, an interesting thing that Harry Weiss does in his buildings is he adds nautical themes to them, themes involving the ocean and sailing. Now, a few of the nautical themes on Fulton House here, the starfish climbing up the side of the building facing the river, then at the top, the porthole-like windows, the windows on a boat, those were added by Harry Weiss as well. Kind of a gross story that comes with this building. Whenever it got redesigned into an apartment, they had to pull about 500 truckloads of matted cord and horsehair out of the 4-foot-thick walls of the building. That's because this building was an old dairy storage warehouse. Essentially, it was a giant cooler. All that cork and horsehair was used as the insulation. They pulled it out whenever the building became residential. Harry Weiss, Nautical Themes Architects, got another building on the tour, and it's the next one on the left. This shorter, triangular-shaped building is called the Chicago River Cottages. They look like 2 sailboats racing in the water. Each resident, whenever they moved in, they paid about $180,000 each for their cottage. That was in the 1980s. All 4 residents stayed there until about 3 years ago. One moved out, put his cottage up for sale, sold within 1 day for $3.6 million. So property value on the river in Chicago has changed quite a bit since the 80s. My voice is getting lost. Now on the right-hand side, another good example of that is on the right. This long building here is called the East Bank Club. It's a luxury athletic facility. How do I like to put that? This is where the Jet Set go to sweat. It's a super fancy gym. Now, the reason I say this gym is so fancy, a few notable people have gone here. The Obama family and Oprah Winfrey have held memberships to this place. But why is it a good example of how property value has changed on the river in Chicago? When this building was built in the 70s, there were no windows on this side of the building. That's because this side is facing the river. Back in the day, when you built on the river in Chicago, you didn't want to have to look at the river. You didn't want your customers to have to see the river either. It's polluted, it's filthy. So they'd seal the wall that faced the river completely off from view. This was so common to do in Chicago, they gave it a name, like it was a method of architecture. They called it back to the river. As you can see, tune has changed. It is covered in windows on this side now, and it's actually illegal to build on the Riverwalk in downtown Chicago and not have the Riverwalk that you built be public. Now, I have been adding this quick tidbit into the tour. If I do not add it in, like 10 people come up to me and ask if anybody here is dying to know where the Dave Matthews bus incident happened 20 years ago. Right behind us is where that story happened. The Kinzie Street Bridge is where the Dave Matthews bus incident happened. If you don't know that story, Google the story later. I'm not going to tell you the story of the Dave Matthews bus incident. I'll say two words, raw sewage and tour boat. And the other thing I will add out of context, not our company, on the right. You're going to see a red brick building with these black balconies on the side of it. Now this building is called the Chicago River Loft, and it's a prime example of something called adaptive reuse in architecture. Adaptive reuse is basically like recycling an old building. This was an old raw paper material warehouse. It is now loft-style apartments. Now a big indicator of an adaptive reuse apartment building is the balconies. Notice how each balcony has these rope-like supports on both sides, kind of like they're hanging off the side of the building. If you notice a balcony that looks like that, it means it was added many years after the building's original construction. Walk around any city for 20 minutes, you'll see a lot of apartments with balconies hanging off like that, because that makes financial sense. You don't have to knock down a whole building and build up something new. You just have to redesign it. It's called adaptive reuse. Now on the right, you're going to see a trapezoid-shaped building in the middle of this park with these white lines wrapping around the outside of it. That building is called Kingsbury on the park, and as we keep moving forward, you'll see right next to us is a rectangular-shaped building with the same white lines wrapping around. That one is called Erie on the park. Kingsbury and Erie on the park were both designed by Lucien Lagrange in the 1970s, and they are both what's called the European industrial style of architecture. Now, what sets the European industrial style apart from a lot of other architectural styles is the white lines you see on the two buildings. Those white lines are the metal framework of the building. It would hold the weight of the building up, and most modern buildings have that. They have metal framework, but usually it is covered up. It's clad over, you don't see it, but you do see it on Kingsbury and Erie on the park. This is intentionally done. It is made to make the buildings look as if they're unfinished, but they're still getting constructed. Moving over to the left. The next building I'm talking about, you can't miss. It's this thing that looks like it has exploded on one side of it. They're taking this one down. They're taking it apart like brick by brick. It's where they used to print the newspaper, the Chicago Tribune. They stopped printing it there about a year ago. They moved out to a suburb called Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, this one's getting knocked down because they're putting in the permanent location for the Bally's Casino right here. And I'll tell you something, I am sad this building is getting demolished because it comes with a pretty fun fact. A few years back, an article voted that building to be the second ugliest building in the city of Chicago. Now, everyone's first question after I say that has to be, if this building is number 2 in ugly, what is number 1 in ugly? What's the ugliest building? Folks, understand something about me as a tour guide. I would never do that. That'd be so wrong to disparage a building in such a way and call it the ugliest. I'm just kidding. It's called the Thompson Center. Yeah, the James R. Thompson Center is widely considered the ugliest building in Chicago. And if you live here, you might have heard that name a lot in the news. In the last 3 years, because a while back Google bought the Thompson Center. They were going to redesign it. Then 2 years ago they came on the news and said, no, we changed our mind, we're knocking the whole thing down. Then about a year ago they came back on the news and said, no, we changed our mind again, we are going to redesign the building. And that makes me happy because architects, they think the Thompson Center is so ugly, but the Thompson Center is my favorite building in Chicago. Why do they think it's ugly? It used to be colorful. It was covered in a bunch of red, blue, and silver paneling wrapping around the outside of it. Architects don't love that. Now they've removed that paneling. It's now just the framework, which is also in a super weird shape. 2 corners of the Thompson Center look like the tiered structure of an Aztec pyramid. One corner is shaped like a cone. One corner is shaped like a slice of cake. It is weird. If you're dying to see this building now, it is a stop on the blue, pink, brown, purple, and green line train. It's the Clark and Lake stop downtown. Running on the L line, here Clark and Lake, hop off, go see the ugliest building in Chicago. Now, why am I talking about that building? We do not see it on the boat ride today. Well, it segues into a suggestion. The Thompson Center and its architect, Helmut Jahn, have a whole wall dedicated to them inside of my favorite museum in Chicago's architecture section. If you were to do one more thing in Chicago, my biggest recommendation would be go to the Art Institute of Chicago. That is one of the best art museums in the country, and it's one of the best in the world. And whenever I say the 2 words art museum, if your first thought is, well, I don't like art museums. If you've never been to the Met in New York City or the Louvre in Paris, go to the Art Institute. It's going to change your mind about art museums. Currently, by Vincent van Gogh, there are 3 paintings on display there, one of his self-portraits. The first painting he did is a view from the bedroom and sunflowers. They also have stuff by Salvador Dali, Pablo Picasso, Frida Kahlo, Claude Monet, Georgia O'Keeffe. A lot of very famous people had the work on display there. Highly recommend the Art Institute. It's one of the best things that Chicago has to offer. Aside from the Wendella Boat Tour, let's talk about this building. Now, right behind us, you're going to see this long building with these red brick horizontal lines on it. Now, This is called the domain, and to talk about it architecturally, this is called the prairie style of architecture. Now, what sets the prairie style apart from a lot of other architectural styles is oftentimes, whenever you're designing a large building in a city, you're going to focus on how tall that building is on the outside of the design by accentuating the vertical lines because it draws your eyes up. It makes the building look taller. With the prairie style, which is what this is, it's the opposite of that. You're trying to replicate the long, flat prairie of the Midwest, so you accentuate the horizontal lines. It draws your eyes forward instead of up, making the building appear flatter and longer. He did not design this building, but the architect that is best well known for popularizing the prairie style, super famous guy by the name of Frank Lloyd Wright. Raise hands who heard of Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect. If you grew up in the U.S., you don't know anything at all about architecture, but you can name one architect, it's most likely Frank Lloyd Wright. The reason I say that, before I started this job, diddly squat about architecture, no idea. But I did know Frank Lloyd Wright was an architect. Now, if you want to see some Frank Lloyd Wright design work, highly recommend you check out a suburb of Chicago where he lived, called Oak Park, Illinois. That's a suburb, it's a separate thing. But yes, Frank Lloyd Wright was stationed in Oak Park for quite some time. He lived there and he designed a lot of houses there. Also, random fun fact about Oak Park, Ernest Hemingway was born there. But now, folks, let's get into history. So to start with the history of the fire, or start with the history of Chicago, I'm going to start in the year 1673 with two guys I have quickly mentioned by the name of Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet. Jacques Marquette was a Jesuit priest, and Louis Joliet was a cartographer and an outdoorsman, kind of like a Davy Crockett type and a map maker, and they were two Frenchmen that were tasked by France to find a trade route from Canada, which at that time was called New France, through the Mississippi River into the Pacific Ocean. Now, if you're picturing a map of the United States, you will realize that trade route did not exist. They found a trade route to the Gulf of Mexico through the Mississippi, and on their way to the Gulf, they encountered their first indigenous tribe called the Illinois people. Now, the Illinois, that is what this state is named after. I cover my building in zero, surrounding buildings with my top down. I know my building. Lighter colored buildings. We're going to get a quick glimpse of the tallest building in Chicago that I am not going to talk about.
Okay, time for a boat tour. तो boat tour हम आपको देते हैं, अंदर जाते हैं, आपको बाहर दिखाते हैं कि बोट पे बाहर कैसा है.
That really annoyed the city of Chicago, because you might notice we just went underneath the highway. And that highway goes through the post office building. It always has. If you do not build this building and start to trouble on top of our road, you're going to declare eminent domain and take the whole building from you. Mr. Davies sells the post office building immediately for $175 million. I do not know what the lesson is at the end of this story, but I gotta believe there's at least one lesson here, because the day after Mr. Davies made that $175 million sale, Mr. Davies died. They say he constantly entertained offers in the building, but he had no friends. Who next to being lonely and negotiated the price.
तो अंदर मिल रहे हैं snacks, drinks.
No idea what to do with this building. Old coal power plant and using you have windfall and that have reality. Not now. You can definitely do something new. Keep it in for like someone. Why won't they go down?
तो ये हमारी बोट है जनाब। वहाँ पे ट्रेन खड़ी है, ट्रेन जाती है यहाँ से। काफ़ी मज़े का व्यू है, आप लोग देखो, प्यारा है शिकागो। फिर शिकागो नेक्स्ट ग्रेट नेबरहुड। आओ, मेरे ख्याल से यहाँ पे कोई कंस्ट्रक्शन हो रही है सामने। मज़े मज़े का व्यू। और ये हमारी बोट जिसके ऊपर हम आए हैं। थोड़ी देर बाद ये लाइट भी ऑन हो जाएगी। बड़ा कूल लगता है जब लाइट ऑन हो जाए। वहाँ पे है एमट्रैक का ऑफिस। पानी देखे कितना गहरा पानी है। क्या मज़े का व्यू है। तो अभी शाम का टाइम है और क्रूज़ वापस जा रही है। हमें खूब मज़े का ट्रिप दिया। इट्स वाज लाइक 90-मिनट ट्रिप और अभी ये वापस जा रही है। एंड लुक एट द व्यू। जब हम आए थे तो रोशनी थी और अभी हम जब जा रहे हैं तो अंधेरा है। अंधेरा होने वाला है। इट्स नॉट कम्प्लीटली डार्क, राइट।